On an ordinary day, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Earth was just another dot in the vastness of the galaxy, and life went on. People went to work, children went to school, and the world seemed to move in its usual rhythm. But that day, something happened, something that would change everything. It began at a small, quiet space observatory in a remote part of the world. The scientists who worked there were used to tracking distant stars, planets, and the movements of objects in space. They were part of a project that monitored communications from deep space, looking for signs of alien life. It was a peaceful job, one that didn't often lead to dramatic discoveries. But then, everything changed. A signal appeared. At first, it was just a strange set of numbers, like static or a glitch. But the observatory team quickly realized this was no ordinary noise. The pattern was too clear, too structured. The signal was coming from somewhere outside of Earth. It was not random. Someone, something, was sending it. And it was directed straight at Earth. The scientists scrambled to analyze the transmission. They believed it was an error at first, perhaps a satellite malfunction or some kind of technical glitch. But the more they studied the signal, the more they realized it was intentional. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. This was a message. The message itself was simple but mysterious. It was made up of words that seemed familiar but, at the same time, unlike anything they had ever seen. The transmission was clear: "We are ready. Prepare for contact." It wasn't an accident. Whoever or whatever sent this message was waiting for a response. The scientists were stunned. They had never seen anything like it. This was the first time in history that Earth had received such a communication from beyond. For the first time, humanity wasn't just a curious observer of space, it was now a part of something much larger. Panic slowly began to spread. What did this message mean? Who sent it? And why did they say Earth was ready? Were they inviting humanity into the galaxy? Or was there something more sinister going on? As the news spread, people all over the world began to question the meaning of this transmission. Was it a message of peace? Or was it a threat? Governments scrambled to gather information. Military and intelligence agencies were put on high alert. Earth wasn't ready for this. No one had prepared for this moment. At the same time, the observatory team worked day and night to understand the message. They could tell the signal had traveled across space, far beyond the reach of Earth's technology. Whoever had sent it had advanced knowledge, knowledge that Earth had yet to discover. And then, it happened. The signal continued to spread. It wasn't just Earth receiving it anymore. It was traveling throughout the galaxy, reaching distant stars and planets. The situation grew more tense with every passing hour. As the signal spread, so did the panic. The galaxies were watching, and they had questions of their own. Some wondered who these humans were. Some worried about the message: what if it was a warning? What if humanity wasn't ready to be part of the galactic community? But as the signal reached farther and farther, something else was becoming clear. There were others out there in the galaxy, others who had been watching Earth for a long time. And now, they knew that humanity had made the first move. A single message had sent shockwaves through the entire galaxy. The question remained: what would happen next? What would the galaxy do in response? And, more importantly, what did humanity's sudden leap into the cosmic stage mean for the future? The message wasn't just a signal. It was a sign that Earth had unknowingly stepped into a much larger game. A game where the rules were unknown, and the stakes were higher than anyone could have ever imagined. This was only the beginning, and Earth had no idea how far this message would take them. As the world waited for answers, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. As the days passed, the mysterious transmission continued to travel through the vast reaches of space, racing through galaxies at a speed far beyond anything Earth could comprehend. The message was simple, but its impact was far-reaching. Every corner of the universe seemed to feel it. What was meant to be a quiet, unremarkable signal from Earth had now become the galaxy's most talked about event. At first, the galaxy's advanced civilizations believed it was a hoax, a prank from some underdeveloped species on a planet they had barely noticed. But soon, it became clear that this was no joke. The message was real. And Earth wasn't some insignificant corner of the universe anymore, it had just made a massive leap into the galactic spotlight. The first to react were the Darnithians, a species known for their cold logic and calculating minds. They had been watching Earth for centuries, studying human behavior from afar, but never interacting directly. Their vast knowledge of the galaxy made them experts in the ways of communication and technology, but they had never seen anything like this before. Their initial reaction was fear. Why would Earth send such a message? Were they ready for contact? Or was this a signal of aggression, a new threat that had emerged in the galaxy? The Darnithians weren't alone in their reaction. The Zorathians, a species known for their advanced military might, were equally alarmed. For centuries, they had been preparing for the possibility of encountering a new species that could challenge their dominance in the galaxy. They had systems in place, plans and contingencies, but this was different. Earth wasn't just any species, they had made a bold, dangerous move that demanded attention. The Zorathian leaders convened in their war chambers, discussing the potential implications of the Earth message. If humanity had the courage to send a transmission into the stars, they could be a serious threat. Or worse, they might be bait, a trap set by an enemy yet to be revealed. There were too many questions and too few answers. One thing was certain, Earth needed to be watched closely. Then came the Sharans, a species of peaceful explorers who had traveled through the galaxy, spreading knowledge and seeking new civilizations. The Sharans were the first to see the transmission for what it truly was, an invitation. A message of peace. To them, it was an opportunity for collaboration, for expanding their networks of peaceful relationships. They sent out a reply, extending a hand to Earth, hoping to offer friendship and guidance in the vast galaxy. But their reply was met with hostility by the Zorathians. To the Sharans, the transmission was an opening for cooperation, to the Zorathians, it was an opportunity to conquer. The Zorathians had no interest in diplomacy. They saw this as an opportunity to eliminate a potential threat before it grew too powerful. The Sharans, though peace-driven, understood the dangers of the situation and warned the humans. They had to be careful about whom they trusted. The more the galaxy responded to Earth's signal, the more the tension grew. Some species reached out to offer protection, while others prepared for war. Earth, in the meantime, had no idea the chaos it had caused. Back on the planet, people continued their daily lives, unaware that their world was now at the center of an intergalactic power struggle. Governments tried to understand the meaning of the message, while military forces began to prepare for the worst. Was this an invitation to join the galactic community? Or was it a signal that something far more dangerous was on the way? The Earth governments were in a state of confusion, torn between fear and hope. Some factions wanted to send a response, but they didn't know what kind of response would be appropriate. A peaceful reply might open the door to allies, but what if they were wrong? What if sending a message of peace to the wrong species meant destruction? And what if Earth wasn't strong enough to defend itself? Meanwhile, deep in the heart of the galaxy, the Darnithians were calculating the odds. They studied the humans, gathering information, watching their social structures, their technology, and their potential. They recognized that humans had something they didn't fully understand yet. It wasn't just their technology. It was their resilience, their creativity, and their unpredictable nature. Humanity had already proven it could survive against overwhelming odds. Was that why they had sent the message? Across the stars, the galaxy's leaders waited. They watched the human response, knowing that one wrong move could ignite a war that would spread across the cosmos. The Darnithians, the Zorathians, the Sharans, and every other species that had received the transmission understood one thing: Earth was no longer a silent observer in the galaxy. Humanity had made its first bold statement, and now the galaxy would react. But the true question remained: How far would this simple message go, and what would it ultimately mean for the future of Earth? The suspense continued to build. The galaxy wasn't sure whether humanity would be a powerful ally or a dangerous enemy. And, for the first time in history, Earth stood at the edge of something far greater than itself. Back on Earth, life was rapidly changing. The message had sent shockwaves throughout the world, but what most didn't realize was that Earth was now facing an unknown threat far greater than anything it had ever known. People across the globe were unaware of the growing tension in the galaxy. Governments and leaders were scrambling to respond to the unexpected transmission, but they were unprepared for the consequences of their actions. While some leaders wanted to send a message back, others feared what such a response might trigger. Was it safe to trust the alien civilizations that had already begun to respond? The message had been simple: we are ready. Prepare for contact. But what did it truly mean? And who exactly were these beings who were responding to Earth's bold statement? As uncertainty gripped the world, a powerful faction within the military-industrial complex, calling themselves the Vanguard, began to emerge. The Vanguard had been quietly planning for this moment for decades, preparing for a time when humanity would make its mark in the galaxy. They knew that Earth was not ready to face the advanced civilizations that had already responded, and they had been quietly working behind the scenes to build secret technologies, weaponry capable of defending humanity from a galactic conflict. The Vanguard was composed of some of Earth's brightest minds, but their approach was controversial. They believed that humanity's future in the galaxy depended on showing strength, not diplomacy. In their view, any attempt to make peace with the alien species would only expose Earth to potential destruction. They had a plan to protect Earth, but it came with risks. And they were willing to go to any lengths to ensure that Earth would survive, even if it meant going to war. The Vanguard's plan was simple but dangerous. They had secretly developed a fleet of advanced ships, capable of intergalactic travel. These ships were equipped with technology that could rival the most powerful alien civilizations. The Vanguard believed that if humanity showed its power first, it would be able to hold its own in the galaxy, making it impossible for other species to attack Earth. But the idea of using such force against unknown species was deeply troubling. Would it make humanity a target for galactic retaliation? As the Vanguard prepared its fleet, news of their plans leaked to the public. The world was divided. Some people saw the Vanguard as heroes, the only ones who could protect Earth from the dangers lurking in the stars. Others saw them as warmongers, willing to throw Earth into chaos for the sake of power. The debate raged across the globe, but one thing was clear: Earth was not ready for a galactic war, and it was becoming more likely by the day. Meanwhile, in the midst of the rising tension, the Sharans, the peaceful species that had sent their reply of friendship, warned humanity. They feared that the Vanguard's actions would lead to disaster. They urged Earth's leaders to choose diplomacy, to avoid a conflict that could result in the destruction of Earth itself. The Sharans had seen the kind of destruction that occurred when two powerful civilizations clashed. They knew that humanity's future in the galaxy would depend on building relationships, not on weapons and warfare. But the Vanguard was unmoved by their pleas. They believed the galaxy was too dangerous to trust anyone. They were determined to prepare for the worst, and as they readied their fleet, they reached out to the world's governments, urging them to support their cause. Some leaders agreed, seeing the Vanguard as the only realistic path to survival. Others refused, calling for peace and unity. The debate reached a boiling point. The world stood at the edge of an unprecedented crisis. Some believed that humanity's best chance for survival was to show force. Others believed that peace was still possible, but only if humanity could prove itself worthy of the galaxy's trust. The Vanguard, however, were ready to take things into their own hands. They began recruiting the best pilots, engineers, and scientists from across the globe to join their cause. Earth's first intergalactic fleet was coming to life. As the Vanguard prepared for action, the rest of the world was watching. People began to wonder, what if the galaxy had no interest in peace? What if Earth's attempt to reach out to the stars had opened a door to war, a war that humanity wasn't prepared to fight? The world held its breath as tensions mounted. Military leaders across the globe watched the vanguard's movements with unease. The power struggle within Earth was only intensifying. But no one knew what was truly happening out there, beyond the stars. The galaxy's response to humanity's transmission was still unfolding, and the future of Earth remained uncertain. Would the vanguard's plans keep Earth safe, or would they push humanity into a war it couldn't win? In the streets, in government buildings, and in secret underground facilities, people prepared for the unknown. No one knew what the future held, but one thing was clear: Earth was no longer a passive observer in the universe. It had become an active player, caught in a game far larger and more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. And soon, the entire galaxy would know what humanity was truly capable of. But would it be enough? It was the moment that humanity had feared yet expected. The Vanguard's ships, sleek and powerful, began their launch from Earth's surface, igniting the skies as they streaked into space. The world watched with bated breath, some in awe, others in terror. A decision had been made. There was no turning back now. The Vanguard believed that the best defense was a strong offense, and they were not about to let anyone make the first move against Earth. Their fleet, equipped with cutting-edge weapons and advanced technology, was a symbol of human power. But even they knew that the galaxy's forces were formidable. Earth's new fleet, though powerful, was still a newcomer in a galaxy that had seen countless wars and battles for millennia. What would Earth do when faced with enemies who had far greater resources and centuries of experience? As the Vanguard ships made their way into the depths of space, the first confrontation occurred. The Zorathians, the galaxy's most war-hardened civilization, were the first to respond. Their fleet, massive and heavily armed, had been waiting. They had suspected Earth's message would lead to this moment, and they had prepared for it. They considered the Vanguard's arrival as nothing more than a challenge to their dominance. The Zorathian ships engaged the Vanguard fleet in the darkness of space. What followed was nothing short of a spectacle: flashes of light, explosions, and a cacophony of violence that shook the very fabric of space itself. The battle was brutal, and it was clear that Earth's forces were outmatched. Despite the Vanguard's advanced weapons and tactics, the Zorathians' sheer numbers and experience began to overwhelm them. But Earth wasn't alone. Unknown to the Vanguard, the Sharans, who had tried to warn humanity of the consequences, had been watching closely. They were appalled by the violence that was unfolding. The Sharans had long advocated for peaceful coexistence among civilizations, but it was clear that the Vanguard would not stop. They had to act, but they were not interested in war. Their fleet, smaller and less powerful than the Zorathians, arrived just in time to intervene. In an unexpected turn of events, the Sharans entered the battlefield, positioning themselves between the Zorathian and Vanguard fleets. They communicated with both sides, urging them to stop the fighting. They spoke of the greater threat that loomed over all of them, a force far more dangerous than any of their current conflicts. But neither the Zorathians nor the Vanguard were interested in listening. The tension between the two sides had escalated too far. There was no room for diplomacy anymore. The war had begun. However, the Sharans were not ones to give up easily. They didn't retreat into the shadows. Instead, they turned to their allies among the galactic civilizations who were still undecided. With the threat of war hanging over all of them, the Sharans appealed to reason, arguing that humanity's survival depended on unity, not division. Slowly, the message began to spread, and other alien species began to realize the true cost of a galactic war. Yet, the fighting continued. Earth's forces, led by the Vanguard, fought with relentless determination. They were no longer fighting only for survival, they were fighting to prove their place in the galaxy. They had been underestimated for so long, and now they had the chance to show the universe just what humanity was capable of. It wasn't just about defense anymore, it was about asserting power. The Zorathians, however, were no strangers to war. Their forces continued to push forward, but they were not prepared for the cunning strategies that Earth and the Vanguard had devised. The Vanguard had been building up their forces for years, and now they were using everything they had to fight back. While the Zorathians had the numbers and firepower, Earth had something else, a will to fight for their future, something that could not be measured by firepower alone. As the war raged on, humanity's place in the galaxy began to shift. The news of Earth's unexpected resistance spread across the stars. The galaxy's civilizations, who had once looked down on humanity as primitive and weak, now saw them in a new light. The humans weren't just struggling to survive, they were fighting back with everything they had. The vanguard strategy of overwhelming force, though controversial, was working. The Zorathians were beginning to take notice. But the war was far from over. The Zorathians' resolve remained strong, and they had a few tricks left up their sleeves. They knew they could not let Earth's message stand without consequences. The fight for dominance in the galaxy was reaching its peak, and it was clear that Earth's future was hanging in the balance. Would the galaxy accept humanity as an equal, or would it fall to the overwhelming might of the Zorathians? As the vanguard continued to lead the fight, the Sharans kept trying to broker peace. They knew that no matter how strong humanity's forces were, there would always be a price to pay. But even the Sharans weren't sure if they could stop the war now. The question of whether humanity could truly stand on its own in the galaxy was still unresolved, and only time would tell. The fate of Earth was no longer in the hands of its leaders alone. The galaxy had watched, and now it would decide if humanity had a place among the stars, or if they would be wiped away, just like so many civilizations before them. The war had begun, but the true battle for humanity's future was only just starting. The war raged on, its destructive consequences rippling through the galaxy. The Vanguard's fleet, once seen as an imposing force, had been battered by the sheer might of the Zorathians, yet they fought with unyielding determination. Earth's forces, led by the Vanguard, had learned quickly and adapted to the brutal tactics of their opponents, but the battle was far from over. Each day, the conflict grew more desperate, with both sides unwilling to back down. Earth had proven its resilience, but the price of that resilience was beginning to take its toll. The future was uncertain. Meanwhile, in the background of the galactic chaos, the Sharans, who had tirelessly worked to prevent the war, were preparing to reveal the truth. They had been monitoring the entire conflict from afar, gathering data, and waiting for the right moment to intervene. The message from Earth, though simple, had not been the catalyst for the galaxy's panic. It was a signal, yes, but it was much more than that. The Sharans had discovered something that would change everything, something that could end the war and reshape the galaxy. The Sharans, known for their peaceful nature, had long feared the ancient, unknowable entity that existed beyond the known galaxies. It was a force so old, so powerful, that it made the greatest civilizations of the galaxy tremble in fear. It was an entity that had consumed entire star systems in its wake, leaving nothing behind but empty voids. The Sharans had been monitoring the movements of this entity for centuries, and they had come to a grim realization: humanity's transmission had unknowingly reached the attention of this ancient being. This was not the first time the entity had been awakened. It had appeared before, but each time, civilizations had fallen, destroyed by its overwhelming power. The Sharans knew that humanity's message, "We are ready. Prepare for contact," was not just an invitation to the galaxy, it was a beacon that had been seen by the ancient force. And now, it was coming. The Sharans knew they had to act quickly. They sent an urgent transmission to the Vanguard, hoping to stop the war before it escalated further. The message was clear: stop the fighting. The true enemy is coming. The Sharans revealed what they had learned: the ancient entity, known only as the Void, was on its way, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Void did not care about politics or power struggles, it only sought destruction. It had no alliances, no mercy. At first, the Vanguard was skeptical. The thought of a single entity being powerful enough to end the war, to wipe out entire civilizations, seemed impossible. But the Zorathians, still engaged in battle with Earth's forces, quickly realized that something was wrong. The signals of the Void's approach were already beginning to reach their systems: disturbances in space-time, waves of energy that caused sensors to malfunction. It was the same phenomenon that had been witnessed before the collapse of other civilizations. The void was coming, and no one, not even the Zorathians, could stand against it. The realization hit the galaxy like a shockwave. Every civilization that had been watching Earth's conflict had underestimated the true threat. The void wasn't an external enemy, it was the galaxy's greatest fear, the reason many civilizations had remained in hiding, the reason they had all kept their power in check. Now, the void was coming to Earth, drawn by the very signal that had initiated the war. The leaders of the galaxy, realizing the enormity of the threat, began to put aside their differences. The Sharans called for a ceasefire, urging the Zorathians and the Vanguard to join forces. The universe had no room for petty conflict now, it was a fight for survival. The question that everyone faced was whether humanity could play a role in this battle. Could Earth, with its newfound strength, rise to the occasion, or would it become another victim of the void's endless hunger? The battle lines between the Zorathians and the Vanguard slowly began to blur. It wasn't the fighting that mattered anymore, it was the survival of all life in the galaxy. The Sharans had always believed in peace, but they understood now that peace alone wouldn't stop the void. They needed strength, unity, and a force powerful enough to face what was coming. As the void's arrival drew near, humanity's place in the galaxy became clear. Earth, which had once been an insignificant speck in the universe, had proven itself to be a force to be reckoned with. The Vanguard, though feared and controversial, had pushed humanity into a position of power and influence. But the question remained, would humanity's spirit of survival be enough to face an enemy of such unimaginable destruction? In the final hours before the void's arrival, the galaxy united, strange alliances formed between species that had once seen each other as rivals. The Sharans, the Zorathians, the Vanguard, and even the lesser-known species all worked together, pooling their knowledge and technology to prepare for the coming storm. The fate of the galaxy rested on this fragile alliance. As Earth's leaders prepared for the battle ahead, they understood that they were no longer just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of the galaxy itself. The transmission that had sparked the war, the message that had sent shockwaves through the cosmos, was now the key to uniting the galaxy's forces. The void, once an unimaginable threat, was now the enemy they all faced together. But the ultimate question remained, could Earth, with its newfound allies, survive the void's onslaught? Or would the galaxy fall into the same dark void that had consumed countless civilizations before? Only time would tell. But humanity, for the first time, stood shoulder to shoulder with the galaxy, ready to face the unknown with everything they had. The final battle was about to begin.